Hey folks, thanks for coming by today. We're going to talk about how to sell and buy a home at the same time. Now, we have several different strategies we're going to talk about today. This is probably the number one objection we hear right now from sellers when they're thinking about making a move and they're not sure where they're going to go next. So let's dive right into it. Now, here's a little bit of an agenda. As you can see, we have 8 different strategies that we're going to go over. I'm going to talk about pros and cons of each one. And some we may spend a little bit more time on than others. And if you have specific questions or one of them jumps out at you, there'll be a way to contact us at the end and we can set up a time to chat a little bit further. So before we start, who am I and why am I here talking about this? So I'm a real estate broker, a real estate coach, and I own a team. I've been in real estate since 2011. I'm a lifelong Richmonder, so we're going to highlight some things that are important to our market specifically. In the last 2 years alone, we've helped 50 different homeowners sell and buy at the same time. And that's over 300 families lifetime that we've helped with a real estate need. And so this is in our blood. I grew up in the industry, I grew up in the market, and I really speak true to this from experience. I do lead the Eden Properties team with KW Metro Center, so there are several of us eat, sleeping, and breathing this stuff, and we hope to be your real estate resource of choice. So when it comes to selling and buying at the same time, number one is intentionally first, because this is the most common one we see. It is a contingent offer. It's also known as what's called a first right of refusal. I've given you a little dialogue here. This is like saying, I want to buy your house, but I have to sell mine first. We are putting what's called a contingent offer under contract. So you're going to actually put an offer in with the terms that you want to buy for a property. Now, there are some cons here. The seller can still market their home for sale. They just have to disclose that they've accepted a first right of refusal offer. If another offer is to come in, they actually have 24 or 48 hours. This is a negotiable piece, and it's oftentimes decided on that addendum when your offer is submitted. But this is the typical range that they will have that amount of time to give you an opportunity to remove your first right of refusal. So what that means is, do you have the ability to buy that house non-contingent? If that is not the case, they will take the other offer and you will lose the contract and just continue focusing on trying to sell your house. The good news is, or a pro to this, is you will know your ratified contract terms. Most importantly, the purchase price, which oftentimes dictates what your financial needs may be. So you will know what your new purchase price is. So then you will know what you need to sell your current house for in order to have that cash to close or down payment. Now, there's 2 different ways to go about an inspection or any contingency that's associated with the contract. The inspection being the most important one. We actually encourage our folks to go through with the inspection right away because we want to make sure that they still plan to move forward on that house. Technically, the inspection window or the contingencies as a part of that purchase agreement do not take effect until your first right of refusal is removed. So until you are under contract on the sale of your home, would those timelines start? However, we like to move forward with the inspection right away for our clients because we want to make sure we can get in a repairs agreement accepted by the seller on the house that you're buying before we accept an offer and in essence sell your house, and then you not know where you're going because it falls apart. Let's talk reverse contingency. This is exactly the opposite. So this is what I call a seller offer, or we will list your house with a reverse contingency, meaning I'm only going to accept an offer for the sale of my house if and when I find where I'm going next. Oftentimes this has a TBD close date. Yes, you can ratify or accept a contract with to be determined as the close date. If you think about new construction or when you build a house, this is oftentimes used in that scenario when the house has not started construction. We can do the exact same thing when representing with sellers. Now, if we are doing a TBD close date, it does pend a little bit of stress or nuance for when it comes to marking it in the MLS. However, we typically can set a date far enough in the future that will allow you time to find where you're going next. So we can pend your house in the MLS. Again, you will know the ratified contract terms. This time it's on the exact opposite side. So you will know what you're selling your current house for, what your net proceeds are, and what your budget is moving forward while you go to shop. Now, typically we would be working with the buyers and already starting the process of looking at houses. This is not to say we haven't done the pre-approval or started looking at property for where you want to buy next. We just may not have found that purchase yet. So a lot of times, if you cannot qualify for financing without selling your house, this is a good method of operation where you can move forward by getting your house under contract. So then your lender is happy and can give you a pre-approval, and you're not having to write a contingent offer. Back to slide one, this is technically considered a weaker offer because you are having a contingency that needs to be satisfied first. So if you're in the case of a multiple offer scenario, or there are other offers on the table that are not contingent, you are likely to not have your offer accepted. Whereas number two, reverse contingent, you avoid that problem because you're already under contract on your house. So a key point to think about with one or two, when there's a contingent offer in place, you have to be under contract or pending on the sale of your home. You don't have to necessarily close yet. We can time those closings up later where you can close on the sale of your house and then close on the purchase. Number three, an off-market sale. We are seeing a lot of these take place right now because this is oftentimes the easiest way for a seller to dictate their terms, and you can avoid increasing the days on market. So what an off-market sale typically looks like is you're going to market your home within the brokerage or the firm that you hire the listing agent with. Now, in our case, we're in a little bit of a unique scenario because we're part of the Keller Williams Metro Center group, which is actually it's 5 brokerages in one. So we have 800 plus agents that we can market your property to and coordinate private showings and doing off-market sales. Now, you would set your price, your necessary closing date, and your move-out date, which can be different than the closing date. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And you can set all of those terms before you even agree to show your house. So for example, if there's a potential buyer for your property, they're going to tentatively agree to all of those things before they even ask to see your house. These are private showings. There is no form of public marketing. Matter of fact, it's not allowed. So there's not going to be a sign in the yard. There's going to be no open houses. Your house listing is not going in the MLS. And thus, you're not going to have those days on market uptick. Another pro in this is you will only show it again if we pre-agree to those terms. Now, a con with the off-market sale is you're not getting that same public exposure or that marketing with all of the eyes on the property. So it can take a little bit longer to sell. This works exceptionally well when people don't have a necessarily hard and fast timeline. So for example, they want to sell or they're only willing to sell if they get a certain price. Maybe they're waiting on a job change or something like that that's near in the future. Rent back. This is the most common version of what we see. And oftentimes this will actually be combined with other methods. So a rent back is more formally known as an extended seller possession. This is where you will sell your current house and actually close on the sale, and then you continue to rent past the original closing date. Now, when I say rent, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but it can be negotiated based on multiple things. So we've seen everything from a free rent back or extended possession to a paid at a smaller amount. And then lastly, we've seen it equal to whatever the new mortgage payment may be. And a lot of times, if there's multiple offers, that's when this rent can be negotiated in multiple ways. Now, another way of looking at this too is let's go back a few slides to the reverse contingent offer with that TBD close date. You can say, I'm only going to accept my house if I know or sale for my house if I know where I'm going next. You can also use the off-market sale or that reverse contingency and say, I'm only going to accept an offer if you can agree to a rent back. Now, the beauty of this is you will receive your funds or your proceeds from your sale. Obviously, you'll know the sales price and you'll know how much money you have to work with on moving towards your new home. Typically, this is only done up to 60 days past the closing date. Now, that is typically a lender requirement. If it is a conventional loan with 20% down, you may be able to get away with a little bit longer. However, if it's longer than 60 days, you're technically moving into what's called the investment property realm. And so they may require a different type of financing. Now, the beauty of it is it allows you time to find, ratify, and close on your new home so you don't have to move twice. That's why we see this one done so often. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when you sell your house or accept an offer for the sale of your house, it takes about 30 to 45 days to close. And then if you add another 60 days of rent back, you have roughly 90 days or 90 plus days to find and close and move to that new home, which is typically plenty of time to do so without having to move twice. Now, let's talk about renting your current home. This is what we like to call as hedging against those interest rates. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. But more importantly, if you rent out your current home, you're actually using it as an income opportunity, which can be used to qualify for the new mortgage. If you rent out your home, that income from the rent that you're receiving can actually be used as additional income to qualify. You can hire a property manager to make it turnkey. So you're literally receiving mailbox money and you're not having to become a landlord. In today's market, especially in Richmond, the rental market is soaring, and this makes it very easy for positive cash flow. The average rent is oftentimes significantly higher than what the mortgage may be, especially if you've been in your house for a while or if you were fortunate to lock in one of those 2 to 3% interest rates. Now, speaking of the 2 to 3% interest rates, or even in the fours, a lot of times that's an objection or that's a point of emphasis that we hear from sellers on why they don't want to sell or move from their current home. Now, when I mentioned at the start of this slide that this can be considered a hedge, it's because we actually have clients that are renting out their current home and buying something new. And then if something were to change or unforeseen circumstances were to come up in the future, and you were having to sell that new home, you can actually move back into your old home and still have that 2 to 3% interest rate. So you have that kind of fail safe and you can keep your 2 to 3% interest rate without giving it up. Now, if we have that positive cash flow, you may actually come out ahead, and that may help you cover the difference from that higher interest rate or that higher payment on the new home. Now, if you're going to rent out your home, you can obviously set the lease terms. You can start the rent date to allow time to find the new house. So for example, you can say, I'm not going to start the rent until April 1 because I want to find my new house and close in March and move out, and then we would start the rent. And so there's a lot of different opportunities you would have with renting that current home out. And things can always change. Now, we've also seen people do short-term, or clients do short-term rentals. So they may rent their house for 6 months, which would allow them to qualify, purchase on their new home, close, and move out. And then at the end of the 6 months, they're going to be in the summertime, and they would then list their house and sell for a little bit higher amount and come out ahead, and then they can recast the loan. Bridge loans or HELOCs. This is another opportunity where you can keep that 2 to 3% interest rate. A lot of times with a home equity line of credit, which is what a HELOC stands for, and with bridge loans as well, actually, you have interest-only payments. Now, with a home equity line or a bridge loan, you only pay money, or you only have a payment on the amount that you use. So for example, you could take an equity line of credit out for $150,000, pull out $75,000 for a down payment on your new home, and your payments are going to be on that $75,000 that you pulled out, not the whole $150,000. These are great options in competitive markets where that contingency loan that I mentioned will not get accepted. And so you have an opportunity where you can buy non-contingent. And then from there, you can, with buying non-contingent, you can actually oftentimes win a multiple offer scenario. Now, there are no prepayment penalties, and these can be used for a primary residence or to purchase a second home. So we've actually seen some people take advantage of the equity they have, open up a home equity line of credit, and use that as a down payment to buy an investment property or a rental property. Now, when you sell that current home that you have the equity line of credit on, you would then use those proceeds to pay off your equity line of credit and that original mortgage. This is a great opportunity to allow you to buy a new home, move out of your current house, and then stage it and then sell it for top dollar. And then that home equity line of credit can be used, like I said, for that down payment and paid off when you sell. Now, let's talk about the only option that's on here that involves moving twice. This is the buy, rent, build scenario. Now, the beauty of this is you can take advantage of hot seller markets. So you may want to sell your home now while the demand still is hot, especially if you're in an area that is expected to cool off later in the year. You can also take advantage of builder incentives when you're doing this process. So a lot of builders will actually start construction with a small deposit or with an option amount of money down. Typically, it's like 5% of the purchase price. So if you have those funds on hand, or even if you don't, you may have the ability to sell your current home, start construction, and then you rent somewhere short term while your home is being built. A lot of times these folks that take advantage of large equities in their current house will take some of those proceeds to pay off other debt. They can also take some of those proceeds to use towards rent. We've actually seen people pay a year's rent up front out of their proceeds. So they're not even really living in a payment while their house is being built. And then they would move into their new home at the end of their lease. This is the only move twice option, and yet it also allows you to take advantage, like I said, of selling your home currently. You know what kind of money you're working with. You can start construction on the build process, and it works as a way to kind of solve that 60-day limit on the rent back. Now, recast the loan. This is one of our favorites because it's actually probably the most financially beneficial. It also makes you typically more competitive in markets when contingent offers aren't going to get accepted. Now, you will need to qualify. So a lot of times people can qualify for 2 mortgages, meaning you can keep your current mortgage and buy the new house. What this involves doing is buying your new house, moving out into the new home, and then selling your old house. Once the old house is sold, you then use your proceeds to re-amortize the loan or restructure the loan. It's different than a refinance, so it oftentimes costs less than a refinance because you're not redoing the loan in terms of mortgaging. You're just re-amortizing it by putting a large chunk. Now, you may typically put a lesser down payment down, and you might have a payment or two on that original mortgage, which could be higher. But typically it's a much shorter process, or it's short term, where it's just a month or two. And it makes it much easier to stage and sell your current home when you move out. Like I said before, this is one way of being very competitive without having to buy being contingent. And again, then you know your proceeds can be used to recast that loan. You can oftentimes decide how you want to split those proceeds up. So we have some folks that have a large amount of equity in their current home that will decide to take a portion of it to recast the loan. And then the other portion, they may reinvest into something else. They may pay down other debt. They may gift it to their children, something along that nature. So that's it. It's pretty quick and pretty self-explanatory. We wanted to go over these 8 different options, but what's next? If one of them jumped out to you or you have extra questions, reach out to us. Let's connect. This is meant to be a quick overview or a webinar to introduce you to options. We want to talk a lot deeper, take a deeper dive and talk a lot more about what makes the most sense for you in your scenario, and then really take a deeper dive into what questions you may have. So reach out. Our phone number, or my direct phone number, is on the screen. Our email's on the screen. You can also find us at any of the Eden Properties RVA social medias, and let's chat further.